Hi, I'm Jen. I'm the owner of Cookhouse in San Francisco, and I hope you're all staying really safe and very clean. um, I know this is kind of a tough time for our industry, so I thought I'd film a little video just sharing a few of the things that I've learned and a few of the things that I have found in my quest to, keep my business alive. And I hope it helps some of you guys as well, just because I know the entire industry for events is going to go through a tough time in the next, not just the next 3 weeks, of course, when we're under lockdown, but also, the next 8 weeks, given that the federal government has recommended that we don't get together in groups of 10 or more, which is pretty much all our events. So let's just go through a few of these things together. I'm going to go through the following three things. What can we do in the meantime in terms of work, and what can we get prepared, and how might we work with clients during this time? Secondly, if you're freaking out about the bills and you're in the event industry, either because you're a small business like me or you work in the event industry, as an employee, then here's some resources that I've found and that might benefit you. Third, if you're finding a way or trying to look for a way to help small business, I've got a few things, or a couple things that I found that might be helpful. Okay, so to start, I thought I'd go into cancellation policies in general. This might have to change just given the climate right now. We've got to make cancellations possible for clients that might be forced to change plans because of an extended or second lockdown, or because a relative gets sick. Of course, these are all things that a lot of our clients are already thinking about, but it helps our clients to relax a little bit and just know that their business is safe with you, just in case something like that happens. We also want to make postponements possible, of course, within reason. But just in case, we want just in case, let's say a local government says you can't leave, you can't travel, etc. So they have to cancel their event because maybe they live in Chicago or New York or something. And so they can't make it, or the guest of honor can't make it, or, there's some other, impossible situation which, is going to make them cancel their event. Otherwise, well, it's still great to have their business, and we still, it would be great to just, if it's an event that they're still going to have, then definitely make postponements part of your policy as well. And don't forget to put enough buffer so that you don't incur too many costs to put your business in the hole as well. So for some, let's say you're a chef, you might want to make the last day that they could possibly postpone the day prior to when you would normally order ingredients. Or for us, for example, it's before we incur a certain number of labor hours for staff. We actually do most of the work for an event way before an event happens. But the last 20% or so is done within that a small time window closer to the event. So we make our cancellation postponement policy based on that. And you might want to make it before you incur costs with contractors. So that's a possibility too. It just depends on how your business is run and where you start incurring, or when you start incurring costs. Also, if you don't already know about it, there's a common clause in many contracts called a force majeure. This is something I thought I hardly ever see. It might also be called the act of God clause, but it's relevant now. It basically means that if there are unforeseen circumstances that prevent someone from fulfilling a contract, you're released from the contract. So we don't know when the virus is going to shut down certain areas of the country or other parts of the world, for example. And if that causes a client to not be able to come to you, or let's say they're in an area that's just fine, and we are locked down for another 3 months, longer than expected, then basically it provides a little bit of a procedure for one party to notify the other. And then if one of the parties can't actually fulfill their end of the contract, then they're released from the contract. And it's like you get your deposit money back if you're the client, but there's no penalty for the event venue or the event vendor to just because they couldn't perform their part of the contract because we were under lockdown or something. So I think that one's an important one to consider if you have a contract on file with your clients, which you should. And if you don't already, then this is a great time to work on one. Another thing is that you could offer a discount or a bonus for people that want to book for later in this year. So, for example, there are not going to be that many weddings that are just going to decide I'm not going to have a wedding. They're probably going to have it a little bit later in the year. If they plan for, let's say, late March, early April, if they couldn't get together with their family and friends, maybe they'll just get married in private. Maybe they'll just, delay it until September. Who knows? But it's not likely that they're not going to have some kind of celebration. So you may want to encourage them to book for later in the year, and that way you can get the planning started now. You can get a lot of the work that you can do from home now done while you have the time at least, and then when you get back to work, maybe you'll get flooded requests. Here's to hoping, at least. And in that case, you can focus on those new clients. So that's something you might want to do or consider. If you do get deposits in, I want to mention, depending on your financial status, you might want to not spend all that money if at all possible. So if the client cancels and you have to give back all the deposits, then it's better to have that money than to go into debt, or even worse. Something to consider before you spend all your client's deposit money. Let's say now that you're a small business. I'm a small business based in San Francisco. We have a few employees, and there's a lot of worry about this, of course. There's a lot of uncertainty as to whether business can continue even after coronavirus is over. So, it's not going to last 8 weeks. It's going to impact our business quite a lot more if you're in events industry in general, because it's not just no more than 10 people at a time for 8 weeks. If we're really flattening the curve, it might impact us for a lot longer than that. Maybe there'll be travel restrictions from other areas of the country. We have clients from all over the country, all over the world. So if there are travel restrictions, if certain areas have, still a lot of travel lockdowns, or people getting sick more and more, or even less, but they want to make sure that it doesn't, cause a second outbreak and that kind of thing. We don't know what it's going to be. The news is changing every day. So we might want to just make sure that we are as prepared as possible for that. Right now, there's a moratorium on commercial evictions for small and medium-sized businesses in San Francisco. There's also a COVID-19 Business Resiliency Fund. There's a few different resources for small business owners in San Francisco. And again, I am talking very locally here because I'm a small business in San Francisco, so unfortunately I don't have the time to research different measures for different states and different cities around the country or the world. But so I hope this is useful to businesses in San Francisco. But I will have a link below with the resources. I got in touch with somebody at the Office of Small Business in San Francisco, and who confirmed this is probably the best place that'll be constantly updated with press releases and more news and more information about it. Granted, the press releases are not exactly the biggest sources of information right now. I think they're more just like, hey, we have a plan for this, or we're coming up with this, or here's where you can find more information about this later. So in some cases, you might not find all the information that you're looking for. But I do think that once you know what's available or what's upcoming, you could just set up a Google alert. They're free. You just set up on Google, which will email you once a day with anything new that happens about that certain topic that you're looking at. So, for example, I'm going to start. I'm going to have a business resiliency fund Google alert. I applied for that. It's a $10,000 grant. Which is what we need right now. I need a grant, not a loan, because can you imagine like 6 months or even 3 or 1 or 2 months of backed up deferred bills and all the stuff. It would just be horrendous because we've lost all that business. It's not just going to come roaring back, and even if it does, we've got limited inventory to fulfill it. So I'll link that below. It's onto OEWD's website. And that's where a lot of the press releases and resources are going to be found. Now, if you're a chef, are there ways you might be able to prepare or provide food to your neighbors? If we're successfully flattening the curve, like I mentioned, we might be under lockdown for a little bit longer. So, for example, in my case, I only prepared for about 2 weeks of food, but we're under lockdown for 3 weeks. I'll be okay. I mean, I can go to a grocery store and everything, but there are people who need to minimize their risk of exposure to this disease. And there are people with kids unexpectedly home from college because their college is closed. So they might need a little bit of help once in a while or more regularly to get food to them. Of course, follow the rules and the codes as much as you can, but I do think there's going to be a little bit of demand for it. So it may not be your favorite thing to do, but maybe it'll get you through this rough time. If you are a worker in the event industry, I haven't found that many resources for every kind of worker, but I did notice that there is, oops, I touched my face, my bad. It's okay, right? I'm staying at home. But there is a resource for bartenders, very specifically, by the US Bartenders Guild. And they have a bartender emergency assistance program if you're a bartender or the spouse or child of a bartender. So I'll include that link as well below. And there are probably a lot of people applying. So if the link crashes, then just come back to it in a few hours and try again. Also, the city of San Francisco just announced a plan to provide sick pay leave for workers impacted by COVID-19. And there are 5 qualifications. You can meet any of them. You could be sick with COVID-19, you could be self-quarantined to prevent spread, which is a little bit broad, I think, but there are 3 other categories, but one of them I noticed is that you're home because of a temporary work closure in response to a public official's recommendation. And it's not just a recommendation, it's kind of an order, right? We're under what's called shelter in place order. So we actually have to be at home. If you have to be at home, I don't know if you can just apply for this. I'm not sure, but I'm going to look more into it. And if you find out information yourself, please feel free to comment and update everybody about it. But if you're at home because of a temporary work closure, because San Francisco required us not to, come to work, then maybe this is something you can apply for. And I think it's a full week of sick pay or something. So that might help as well. None of these things alone may get us through as comfortably as we used to, but maybe in combination with each other and us helping each other out with resources, it could help in a much greater way than we would otherwise, I mean. And don't forget also about what you can learn during this time if you can't really rely on income from your main source of pay, your job in the events industry. I hate to say it, but if this is kind of the new normal, or if we've got really serious flus going forward or really bad epidemics, even if they're much better contained, I'm not saying it's the end of the events industry, far from it, but I do feel like it might be a good time, just given that there's so much free online learning or nearly free online learning, and great sources too. There's some really good sources out there. So it's a great time to see what you're good at and enjoy, maybe get a side hustle, maybe change temporarily careers and then come back to events industry if you can. But it's definitely a good time to invest in yourself. And I mean, I've got some favorites myself, and I'm going to research a little bit more as well. We're also thinking about putting out some videos or some courses about how to put together small events, because we focus on events under 30 people. Most of our events are between 10 and 25 people. So that's a niche that I think a lot of people do ask about, even though it's not a huge niche by any means, but it might be a good time for us to put out that kind of education. So that's what we're doing, at least on our end. Now, if you're looking for a way to help small business, I have 2 recommendations for you. I saw on San Francisco's government's website, there is something called Give to SF, and the donations are straight from individuals, I think, maybe companies as well. They're tax deductible, in case that helps. But the donations will directly support 3 categories. There's critical facilities and supplies needed for public health. There are, the most medically and economically vulnerable neighbors. And the third one, which includes me, local businesses and nonprofits. These are all, I think they're setting up this emergency fund just to try and take care of some of the things that are needed to keep San Francisco's economy and health and individuals of our neighbors as good as possible when we emerge from this crisis. So the other thing I was going to suggest is that if you have a favorite small business and have maybe a personal connection, ask what you can do to help. Each situation is different. So some people may not need money, they might need some advice. They might need connections to somebody that can give them a certain advice, or a certain piece of advice. Maybe there's something else you can provide, but if you can provide it, of course, please take care of yourselves first. But if there is something you can provide, I'd encourage you to offer that. Sometimes it's very, very difficult to ask for help, and sometimes if you land on something specific that you can give, then and you just offer it, sometimes it's something that's like, oh my gosh, that's exactly what I was asking. That's exactly what I needed. I just didn't have the presence of mind because I'm so stressed out or something to ask for that kind of help. So please be kind to each other. Let's all help each other out in this time, and I hope to see you guys to see you guys all on the other side of this. This is the first video I've ever made for Cookhouse with my face on screen, so it's a little bit weird for me. But I'm gonna try, and if I find more resources, which I will do my best to find, I'll try and put some more updates up. And I hope that is going to be helpful for everybody. Okay, good night, take care, and I'll see you all again soon. Also, don't forget to subscribe to this channel to find future updates and new videos.